Alright, are you ready?
We recording?
Yes, we are.
Okay, ask away.
So, you served in the meme wars, is that right?
Yeah. 3 tours. Last one cut short, obviously. Lost this to a reverse Terminator.
A reverse Terminator?
A reverse Terminator is when, instead of making the robots seem more like people, the people act more like robots, so it's harder for you to spot the bots. Yeah? One got the better of me.
And in all that time, what was the worst atrocity that you saw?
Worst? Shit, man, I saw a lot. I saw a lot of heavy shit. I mean, I was there, man, when Hulkamania ran wild on BuzzFeed. I saw Brianna Wu take a meme to the face. Yeah, that shit stays with you.
But the worst?
But I think the worst I ever saw, other than all those dismembered anime avatars on the beaches, I think the worst thing was the genocide of the Adpocalypse. And the thing about that is, it's still happening. Alright, enough of that shit. There is stuff going on. Things are afoot when it comes to YouTube, Patreon, payment services of all kinds, and we're looking at a kind of softer, ongoing, slow-rolling Adpocalypse, I think. A few aspects of this are a bit more egregious, a bit more obvious. Both Tommy Robinson and Count Dankula, and doubtless a lot of other people, have had their monetization completely shut off, or at least in a limited state. And some of their videos have been completely locked down. When it comes to Tommy Robinson, I think there may be some justification. If we use Patreon's alleged standard of manifest observable behaviour, then Tommy Robinson is someone who's got into brawls, who has interfered with the judicial system, things like that. So, yeah, that seems to me to be a reasonable standard to do something to him, even though I think it's counterproductive. Dankula, on the other hand, much as his slow slide to the right has upset me, in much the same way as Sargon's has, I don't think he's actually done anything wrong, bad, terrible, particularly. He's just an edgy boy who makes a few jokes. The joining UKIP was probably a misstep, but other than that, I don't see the point. It seems to be guilt by association, and that is not a good place to be. And for anyone who's cheering this on, I'd remind you that these constrictions and rules will inevitably end up applying to you at some point, just as so much LGBT content ended up being shut off from aspects of YouTube before. So that's one thing to worry about. They're going to be tightening restrictions, which we need to worry about as well. Swearing is going to be considered more of a problem. It kind of makes you wonder, what is the point of having an internet broadcast service if the restrictions upon it are going to be more extreme than those found on late night cable television? You know, surely the rules here should be more lax than that. Instead, everything is being treated as if it must be primetime, family friendly, whatever. And yet programs like Game of Thrones, whatever, with gratuitous sex and violence and all of that, people aren't shy of advertising alongside those. And the whole thing, since the Adpocalypse, needs to be based on the false assumption that people necessarily associate the adverts with the content that it appears alongside. This is bullshit. It's a hallucination. Anyone with a lick of sense knows that's not true, so all of this is and was pointless. A whole load of harm for no reason. And yet we all stay here, because it's the only one with the audience and the option for monetization and so on. So we either take the hit or we modify our behaviour in a Pavlovian manner, I guess. Channels have been being banned, demonetized, downlisted, yeah, and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and we keep taking it because there's no real competitor. And that's also true of places like Patreon. And for all people are saying, huzzah, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, wallets and things are now being pressured and are cutting people off from their funding because they are impolitic. Now, I've never been a free speech absolutist, but I've been pretty much over that way. But my decisions and thoughts on this have been challenged of late, which is why perhaps I'm a bit softer about Tommy Robinson. I've never liked him. I've never thought he's a good actor. I think he's a chancer, much as Nigel Farage and a lot of other people are. But still, yeah, I was hesitant. But there are lines that are being crossed. And when those are crossed, I think we do have to reconsider. So things like getting into fights, interfering in the judicial system, stuff like that, I think maybe there is a justification for some control then. But I still think it's largely counterproductive, because this just feeds the victim narrative, the ironic victim narrative that many people on the right have, and it also makes a lot of their claims not just seem true, but it makes them genuinely true. They are being censored, they are being chased off, and it's not just genuinely extreme, horrible people who get into fights or fuck up court cases or whatever else. It's not just them that get hit. Yeah, it's everyone to an extent. You know, I just said fuck, that's probably me screwed. And run-of-the-mill conservatives get hit as well. Yeah, I don't agree with their attitudes, I don't agree with what they say, I don't agree with what they want, but they have a right to express it, surely. It's only when it crosses over into harm that I think any censorship is justified. But I don't see any way out of this. Yeah, and like, we all stay here on YouTube in spite of all this, because there's no competitor, because it's where the biggest audience is. Best we do is maybe cross-post to BitChute or Minds or something else. It's not a long-term solution, but we're willing to do that. So why did people abandon Patreon in droves while we're all still staying here on YouTube? Now, I've been thinking about that a lot. I lost about a fifth of my patrons. A bit of a sting on someone on a mostly a shoestring. You know, I earn a pittance here and there from doing various things. Yeah, so that was become important, and that's part of my living, and for some people it's the bulk of their living or their only living, and we have to be really careful about taking that away from people. Well, I don't think, having had time to think about it, that I am going to pull out of Patreon, because it's just too useful a tool in the same way that YouTube is. I would be a hypocrite to pull out of Patreon but not YouTube. Hopefully I'm never going to be considered a bad enough boy to be thrown off either platform. Yeah, I try to be reasonable, lay out arguments, occasionally lose my rag in the comments like everyone does, but otherwise I'm mostly a good boy, I think. So I'm not immediately at threat, and while I appreciate that other people are, and I understand and appreciate the principled stance that people have taken, it's just the best and really the only tool in much the same way YouTube is. So that's kind of my circuitous roundabout thinking and self-justification and rationalisation as to why I stay here on YouTube and why I'm going to stick with Patreon. But I'll understand if you won't. And for God's sake, someone, get some alternatives going. We need them. Zang.